All right, today we're talking about embracing relevance and thriving in the age of AI augmentation, which is here now. My guest today is Rich Mulholland. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corkin here. I'm the host of the show. And you know, if you've listened to this podcast before, that every week we talk with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. If you check out the archives, we've got, Netflix, Grubhub, Redfin, Kinko's, Gusto, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, lots of great episodes. Check them out in the archives. And before we get into this interview, this episode is brought to you by our company, Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses to give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping companies to run their podcast. We are the easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do three things: strategy, accountability, and full execution. And Rich, I know for you that relationships are critical. We were just talking beforehand about different people in our lives that have a big impact on us. And I love to ask about that during the podcast. And that's what I love about having these conversations. I've interviewed you once before. We get to reconnect again here today. And so that's what I love doing. And I love helping our clients to do that as well. So if you've ever thought about podcasting for your business, you should do it. I know, Rich, you love podcasting as well. If you have any questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. All right, let's talk about Rich. So he is a keynote speaker, author, entrepreneur, self-described mischief maker. He's the founder of Missing Link, which is South Africa's largest presentation firm, and has co-founded multiple different ventures, including 21 Tanks and HumanWrit.es. And he's delivered talks across dozens and dozens of different countries and different continents. His newest book is Relentless Relevance: Be a Threat to the Future Before the Future Becomes a Threat to You, which is coming out later this year in 2025, and also has three other books as well, which we talked about in the different podcasts. But Rich, pleasure to have you here today. And let's talk about this new book. What inspired writing a book about AI today? I imagine you're playing around with it in your various different businesses, but what was your spin on it? Why did you decide you needed to write a book on it? And, well, I should point out that it's not just about AI as well.
Yeah, I'll say that AI is a character in the book. AI is a data point. AI is the dragon, right? It's a force that is both an opportunity and a potential threat that faces us. But there's a bigger one, and the bigger threat. I don't know, John. Do you ever do any of these word of the year exercises?
Yep, I have. Yeah, I did a 3 word of the year exercise for a number of different years. Chris Brogan popularized that idea of picking 3 words. I don't know why it was 3, but it was always 3.
Oh, I love that. Okay, something to explore. So my word of the year last year was relevance. I turned 50 in 2024. I started my company when I was 22, and when I was 22, everything felt easy. And when I was 48, 49, everything felt hard, and I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why. Why did I age out of confidence? Why was I feeling less confident as a way more successful 48-year-old than I was at 22? And it came down to the fact that I wasn't sure if I was still relevant. And I was struggling with that. I realized I was sitting in the co-working space in Cape Town that I had visited. And I was looking at a group of humans, and they were all young, and I was kind of judging them. And then I thought, oh no, but it's their time. They're who I was when I had the energy and the delusional self-belief. And I thought, oh, have I aged out of relevance? What do I have to say? And I started really wanting to explore this concept. And the more I explored it for myself, the more I explored it for my company. And I started flirting with the idea of writing a talk. And a guy reached out to me, and he'd heard me do a video on the topic, and he invited me to do a talk on it. And I thought, well, why not? And I started obsessing with it, because I believe that relevance used to be a waypoint. It used to be something we checked every now and then. Are we still relevant? Let's just dial in and check our relevance. But first of all, we hadn't really thought about what that meant. And second of all, the world has changed. Relevance is no longer a milestone on the path. It's now the road that we travel. And I don't think businesses and aging humans, are nearly obsessed enough with the idea of their relevance. And once I understood that, and once I started obsessing over it, I think that we have an epidemic of irrelevance. And do you remember that film when you were younger, The Never Ending Story?
Yeah.
And that whole thing, I think it was called the nothing or whatever, or that was coming up on you and was catching you. It was us losing creativity. That's how I feel about irrelevance. And I think this irrelevance dragon is traveling at a speed that we've never experienced before. And I don't think we're thinking about it nearly strongly enough.
I couldn't agree more. I talked to someone recently who's a graphic designer, and I said, "So you playing around with all the different AI tools that are coming out?" And they said, "No." And I said, "You're not? Oh my gosh. Like you really need to be aware of what is coming up, what is changing, because it's going to really affect your industry." And that's just one example. There's lots of industries out there where, there could be, there's a huge amount of AI and other digital tools that really dramatically affect someone's industry and maybe even make them irrelevant.
Yeah, so that's what AI is. It's a massive irrelevance accelerator. Right. So it's many things. And the problem is that most people are trying to play defense. The original talk, the first one I did, which seems like eons ago, but it was probably February last year, really focused on people defending things. So I'm a big board gamer. I'm very involved in the board game community. I've got over 1,000 board games myself. And a lot of, publishers are saying, we will not publish a board game that uses AI generated art. And the board game reviewers are saying, we will not review board games that are using AI generated art. And it seems crazy to me because the march of progress has never been stopped by people saying we will not.
Right.
What they get trampled over. And, there's one publisher turned around and said, we will never use any assets. I said, well, hold on a second. Do you use a spell checker? Do you use this?
Grammar checker.
Why would you not? Will you run your rule book through an AI just to make sure that it's really clear and that you haven't missed anything? Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, that was a human's job. And so we had this weird sense. And what I found is, are you familiar with the idea of blue team versus red team? I'm not talking about US politics. I'm talking about hacking.
Yes, I believe so. But explain it for those who don't know.
Cool. So in hacking, one of our first clients at Missing Link years ago was a Tiger team. And the Tiger team is a group of humans that are hired to try and break into a bank security. So their job was to come in and they would try and break in. It was called South African Tiger Team Initiative. And they're the red team. And the red team's job is to break in. And then when they break in, their job is to go to the blue team who've been trying to defend them. They're the Secret Service, if you will. And they've got to tell the blue team how they managed to exploit the system. And then the blue team plugs it up and then the red team tries again. Now, the bottom line is the red team always wins. And that's just history, right? The Secret Service has to stop every bullet, but the hitman only has to do one. And this is the mindset that we need to have. I realized very quickly that my business, Missing Link, a presentation company, we make PowerPoint decks. Essentially, at its simplest form, we make PowerPoint decks and videos for a living. Although we sell presentation strategy, and that's a big part of what we do, and we're, the secret sauce, ultimately the product that goes to a client is a deck. Now, AI can do all of these things. And my team was trying to defend against it. And my argument is we have to go on the offense. We've got to be the threat. So what we have to do is we have to turn around and say, well, okay, how can I put my existing business model out of business using the tools that we have today? And that's the mindset that we have tried to embrace in our business. And it's also the mindset I'm trying to embrace for myself.
And sometimes it's not always easy. I mean, even if you bought into this vision, sometimes it's hard to get all the members of the team to buy into that idea too, right?
It's impossible. It's very hard to do that.
Yeah.
My first book's called Legicide. The basic hypothesis of the book is in an established organization, innovation doesn't happen when you start doing something new. It happens when you stop doing something old. And that's very hard to do because we become, we have a sunk cost. And that was the biggest single challenge that we had in our business.
Yeah. So you're encouraging us to take this red team approach, which is trying to hack into the system, trying to break the system, and to adopt it for your own company and use it for your own company.
Yeah. I mean, a question I would ask myself, if I was a business owner, the question to ask, I wrote a LinkedIn post and it said, why I'm trying to put myself out of business and why you should too. And I basically would say, if I was to start a business tomorrow, competing with my own company, what would I do differently? What tools would I
Great
use to
question. Yeah.
deliver the value that we're doing in a different way?
Mm.
Now, ironically, this is exactly what I did when I started Missing Link in 1997.
Hmm.
Yeah, in 1997, when I started Missing Link, all the guys were using these big. There used to be an edit suite called an Avid, which was this big, big rack-mounted computer system and it was super expensive. Had its own custom keyboard and everything. And everyone was making, custom videos on that, charging $10,000, $20,000 to do a corporate video.
Mm-hmm.
I walked in with a bunch of small Mac laptops, and I was like, "Well, we can make one of those. It takes a while to render, but we can make it for $1,000, $2,000."
Right.
And when you're 22, you don't need much money, and so that's what we did. And the videos were good, and they were, we didn't need the suite. But these other guys were trying to sweat the asset, and I actually had a call from a CEO who years later tried to buy our company, saying, "You're killing the industry. You're being silly, and you're not." And I said, "But I'm making lots of money. I don't understand." Fast forward.
That's hard when you're young and you're trying to establish yourself, and some much bigger company owner comes and I mean, it sounds like he wasn't threatening about it, but you could take it as a threat.
He was trying to be a mentor. Basically, the idea was that he felt that it was a race to the bottom. We were never going to make money. And I said to him, "But we're making lots of money. We're doing really, really well." I mean, I bought a stretch limousine. I was living like a twit, and it was because I was using the tools that were available on the day. So I challenged their business model because I didn't have any of the sunk costs that they had.
Right. But the hard part for you now is 25 years later, you've built an infrastructure, a team, a workforce. You bought equipment, offices, things like that. You've got these sunk costs, just like they did 25 years ago. This new threat comes in. It's hard to disrupt yourself with all those costs, but not to mention to convince the team that you're going to do it the new disruptive way.
Right. And it's inconceivable that in most industries, it's inconceivable that almost nobody would say our industry will not be disrupted. There's some exceptions that prove the rule, right? Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I think we're all aware to some degree these tools will disrupt the way we're doing things. So the question is, do you want to be the person pushing against it, or do you want to be the person that's leading the charge? And the only reason I would rather be the one leading the charge is I figure that if the change is going to happen, by the time it happens, I'd like to be 3 or 4 steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. I liken it also to companies that I've known a lot of companies that have a regional workforce. They hire only people in their little region, and a lot of times they end up paying a lot more than they would otherwise. There's limited, workforce, labor pool that they have to choose from, and they get frustrated by that, and they refuse to find labor from other parts of the globe. I've done the opposite. My team is remote all over the globe, and I've seen companies that have come under threat because they've only hired local workforce, and they end up not being able to deliver as much of a service because they don't have as many team members. So I think there's kind of some similarities there.
Well, it's 100%, and that's why I say this relevance conversation is not limited to AI. There are many, many forces, and it's in the book I challenge the notion of purpose to some degree, because if we start believing that our purpose, or we will never, made in America is the only way that we'll do things, then if that becomes part of your ethos, then it's going to hold you back from changing. And the world has moved on since you wrote that. Mm-hmm. One of the big lines that I really try to push people as a leader is to tell your staff, put a sign on your door and let the sign on the door say, "Remember, you're not telling me that I was wrong. You're telling me that I'm no longer right." Because our staff can see the world, especially, I hire a lot of young people, and they see the world differently to me. But, 5 years ago, I said that it had to be done this way. Mm-hmm. I was a different person. The world was a different world, and everything has changed. Mm-hmm. So don't worry coming to me. You're not saying, "Rich, you were wrong." You were absolutely right, or you could have been right in 2020, but you're no longer right now. And when you train your staff to be able to communicate that way to you, it gives them permission to constantly challenge relevance. And that's why one of the big arguments I make is that if being relentlessly relevant isn't one of your core values, one of the behaviors of your business, that we are on a pursuit to be relevant. And relevance is the state of being appropriate to the matter at hand. Why would anybody not want to be appropriate to the matter at hand? Which begs the question always, what is the matter at hand? And when you start instilling this language in your business, and in fact, for me, again, this was an individual thing. Am I appropriate to the matter at hand, to the world as it is right now? And the areas where I wasn't, I tried to fix.
Let's talk about curiosity, because you write about this in the book. You say that curiosity is the key to staying relevant. Talk about, you seem like naturally a curious person, but how can leaders and how can teams within a company really embrace this culture of curiosity?
Yeah, I think it's different. I think curiosity is this God particle of relevance. I think that deep down, you have to want to improve, and you have to want to learn a different way, and you have to be very, very excited about proving the past version of yourself wrong. And the reason I find that hypothesis exciting is that I want to believe that the best is yet to come. All right. So if the book of my life was written, whenever I die, I would really hope that the photograph they chose for the cover is an event that hasn't happened yet. I want to believe that there's more to come and that it's still exciting. And the only way to do that is to be curious about new, better ways of doing things that the younger version of me wasn't equipped or able to think about. And so I get very, very excited when I get new knowledge that the past version of me didn't have. But it's the same thing, when we train somebody to have a keynote, to write a keynote, I always say to them, you have to introduce any idea with clarity and curiosity. You've got to, the person has to be clear about what they're talking about, but you have to introduce a ripple that they're curious about. And so the job for us as leaders is to unleash, what can my team be curious about this week? What can they go out and be curious about? And the way you make people curious is you find part of their worldview, I think, that they care about, and then you offer them the hint that they may be wrong about something, or they may no longer be right about something. And that becomes an itch that they have to scratch. And that's how we create this culture of curiosity in our business. But of course, the other thing to do is to hire curious people in the first place.
Yeah. Let's talk about Neuralink, which is yet another Elon Musk company, but one that doesn't get as much attention as Tesla and SpaceX and the other ones. You write about that. It's a company that is developing brain-computer interfaces. Talk about it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people in the book, I talk quite a bit about the difference between ANI, AGI, and ASI, artificial narrow intelligence, general intelligence, and super intelligence. And I also go to war with the idea AI as artificial intelligence. I even don't worry so much about this singularity, this post-singularity world in which AIs are equipped with all of these, they're so much smarter than us, because I see that we're about to go through the second hormonal revolution. So the first revolution we had was when we invented speech. All right. So we developed a gene that allowed us to communicate via speech. And that's what allowed our species to Homo sapien to emerge as the winners in the original race between humanoid people. And that was our first hormonal revolution. That was incredible. That was one of the most amazing things in the world. We can communicate at 47 bits per second using voice. How amazing is that? If you understand, previously, people could communicate inefficiently at 1 bit per second, and it was just a grunt. So this was a game changer. Now what's happened is all of that's changed with brain-computer interface. Because if you look at, do you know who Nolan Darbaugh is?
Well, you write about him in the book, yeah.
Yeah. So he's patient zero. He's the first person to have the Neuralink chip in his brain. And he can play video games faster than anybody else can because he just thinks, oh, I want to shoot that guy over there. And then the guy's dead.
Yeah. And I remember when they announced it and they unveiled him, and critically, he's a quadriplegic. So he didn't have use of his arms or hands. And this allowed him to play games and control other things.
It's really simple. I mean, okay, so it's very, very complex technology that does a really simple thing well. There's a Bluetooth chip in a computer, and it says, okay, so what does your brain do when you want to move your hand or your mouse left? And it recognizes the signal that fires off in your brain when you move your mouse left, and it maps that to moving a mouse left. what happens? So generally what has to happen is our ball would have to remember, oh, this is what it felt like to move my mouse left. And then the mouse would move left on the screen. But a crazy thing happened within weeks, was the brain was like, I get it. Don't be stupid. And as soon as he thought about it, the brain just said, okay, well, I'll trigger the thing that says move your mouse left. And of course, it's not doing it at the same bit rate. It's not doing it at the bit rate at which computers operate. Mm-hmm. And so this shit was happening at the speed of thought. Mm-hmm. Now, the hypothesis I make in the book is, do you believe that if that technology exists, and this is Mark 1, and it iterates at the speed and the technology iterates. And I juxtapose it with the idea that there's research in Osaka in which they've now been able to scan your brain and figure out what you're dreaming with like 50% accuracy. And so the marrying of these two technologies together, this will allow people to communicate complex ideas at the speed of thought. So last night, I watched a television show, Rogue Heroes, about the formation of the SAS. If I wanted to communicate to you how I felt, in the finale, I could just think it to you. And my brain-computer interface would connect to my computer, which would go through the internet to your computer, which would go to your brain-computer interface. And you'd be like, wow, that's amazing. Now, the question is, if this technology is that powerful, will we let the quadriplegics have it alone? And the answer to that question is absolutely no. Yeah. So once this technology is so good, everybody will have it. And so what will happen is we will become augmented. It will be an augmented intelligence because it will no longer be just us. It will be us plus AI. And it will change what it means to be human. And I choose to be a future optimist always because we have history on our side to prove it. And I'm pretty optimistic that will be a very, very exciting time that will allow us to solve very, very, very cool problems.
Well, it sounds scary like science fiction, but it's along the lines of speeding things up, right? Because we can communicate with a computer right now all day long. We do, right? We type things out or we speak to Siri or Alexa or whatever, and we tell it what we want, and then it gets communicated to the computer. So this will just be a direct connection that allows it to happen faster. What are some of the ways that, so we talk about quadriplegics, but I guess it could be typing something, or it could be designing a website or designing a program. I guess anything that we do with the computer now, we'll just be able to achieve faster with the brain-computer interface?
Right. So that's exactly what it will be in the beginning, but it'll also be interesting because, so I also talk about the fact that everyone talks about general intelligence, but it's funny because we actually don't require general intelligence. What we require is a connected intelligence. I don't need everything to know how to do everything. I'm very, very happy that my car is able to just drive itself. And I'm very, very happy that ChatGPT knows how to check my spelling. And I'm very, very happy that my chess computer knows how to play chess. It would be amazing if they were just able to interface with each other. So when they needed to know how to play chess, it would be able to do that. So we need more islands and better boats. We don't need one thing that does everything. And in fact, funnily enough, that's exactly what DeepSeek, I wrote about this in October. This is what DeepSeek offers. It basically is a pool of experts. And it says, well, we don't need everything to be thinking about this right now. We only need the chess machine to be thinking about it. So it turns everything else off and just the chess machine works. And that's why it's so efficient. And so that's kind of what's going to happen now, with our brain will be connected. And, the inefficiency, if I had to write AI and type it onto my computer right now, and the distance between the time it takes for me to type A and the time it takes for me to type I, my computer has basically got so bored. It's turned itself off. It's gone to pick the kids up from school. It's made itself some lunch. It's had a sandwich, a little meditation, a hot tub, and it's popped back in just between those two key strikes. We are so frustratingly slow for a computer. It doesn't know it literally turns itself off between key strikes because we're so inefficient. Now we're able to operate at the efficiency level, or we will be able to operate at the efficiency level of the computer. Now that's exciting. But what's really exciting to me is when I can communicate at megabit thought size packets of information to you like this. So everything I want to say in this podcast, I can communicate to you in a millisecond and you'll understand and internalize it. It's like the Matrix.
It's funny. It'll be like if we want to design a website that's for an interior design company, then it'll all pop out in seconds. And an analogy that's coming up for me is like the idea of like dial-up internet from 25 years ago versus today. Back then it was revolutionary. Now we think about dial-up internet and it's just like slow as molasses to think back on how slowly that happened. And yet like what's commonplace today is just instantaneous. You're halfway across the globe from me and we're having this conversation in real time, which is, was mind-boggling 25 years ago. Today it's commonplace.
Absolutely. And it's just that at orders of magnitude faster and more efficiently. But what I also think it will do is it's an infrastructure inversion. So it's a change of the way that I believe that this will change what it means to be human. And some people say this is a bad thing, but if the universe was a 24-hour day, humans, dinosaurs were around for 5 minutes. Humans have been around for 1 second.
Yeah.
At that scale. We do not get to say that we're the fully baked cake. Like any human who turns around and says, oh, well, you're going to change what it means to be humans. I bloody hope so. We are at the primary school level of human evolution, right? And maybe in the book, I kind of say, if we're going to be generous, we can say we're just graduating as adults. We've done the pre-work. Now we're about to find out where the cool stuff starts.
Yeah.
And yes, it's going to change everything, but we're not supposed to be protectors of the current state of humanity. We're supposed to be curators of the future of humanity.
I know we're almost out of time, so that's a good point to kind of end on. But any final thoughts on what is next for humanity? Any further things we should be on the lookout for?
No, I think that the most important thing is that we are ready and we're excited and optimistic about the changes that will happen. And that we want to understand that we need to become part of the change. This idea of revolution is gone. Like we're in a state of constant evolution, and we need to be allowing our businesses to be more fluid, to evolve more, to change more, and to embrace, to go on the offense rather than the defense.
And tell me before we wrap up, tell me about Too Many Robots. So this is a really interesting concept. You have a new company that is doing fractional AI management for companies.
Yeah, so I used to have a sales management fractional business, and I really loved the model. I think it's very, very cool. People want something of high quality, but they don't want to, you pay for it all the time. And I realized that was the same thing with AI. Is people want. There's too many robots, so we can't have one expert. AI doesn't solve a single problem in our business. So we thought, well, what if we put together a pool of people that are not experts? In fact, we're very, very big on that. We go to our clients and say, anyone who calls himself an expert, they're operating at a different level to you. You don't want to get taught to swim by Michael Phelps. We're 2 or 3 steps ahead of you, but there's a team of us and we're trying to solve all different things. And our job is to say, we did something yesterday that we'll tell you about today that you can do tomorrow, and to help our customers think. And we basically sit in their businesses for 1 day a week, essentially, like a normal fractional business. And we try to help change their business's relationship with AI out of the novelty space and into the utility space. Because what we're all using it for is cool, interesting novelty, do things faster functions. And what we're not doing is using it for proper do things better functions. That's what we want to get people to.
And I love the way you name things too. There be dragons, too many robots. I mean, seriously, like maybe you haven't started a branding or a naming firm, but that is in your future. Rich, this has been great. Relentless Relevance, be a threat to the future before the future becomes a threat to you. Too Many Robots is the name of the new company. Where can people go to learn more about you and everything that you do?
Well, it's funny because I wanted to ask you first, before we end, I had just been working with my team earlier today, and we were saying that we believe that one of the best ways to do this is to host a podcast on this topic. And you talk about naming rights, naming conventions. We're brainstorming just earlier today, how we should do that, what we should do. And I actually, would be remiss. I wanted to throw back to you about some thoughts on, do you think that this is a good strategy for us? Is it the kind of thing we should do? My worry is that I don't want it to just be guest after guest after guest for us. And I'm not sure what the format is.
Yeah, I always say that, I've met people that wait years and years, and I ask them, why don't you do a podcast? And they say, well, I had this idea and, that didn't work. And then trying to find the perfect idea. And meanwhile, years go by and they miss out on all the benefit like this of having a conversation, right? And meeting people and using it for networking purposes and business development, all the different ways and you can use it. And so I say just get started. You don't have to have the perfect idea, and it can always evolve and change. My podcast has evolved and changed for me, and it hasn't been the same static thing for a long period of time. So I would say don't worry about trying to find the perfect idea. And I kind of liken it to restaurants. You ever seen like a restaurant open that's like too unique of an idea? And yet, meanwhile, like the Italian place, the Thai place, the burger place and the pizza place are thriving and doing really well. There's a reason why they do well is because that format works. And there's a reason why interview podcasts work well is because that format works. So, sometimes I see people that are like, okay, here's the idea. But there's going to be six of us in a room and we're going to throw out one idea and then someone's going to come up with it. It's like it's overcomplicating it, just go have a conversation with one person.
So what we'd wanted to do, our CEO is called Tamara Wentforth. So TMR, and our URL is too many robots.wtf, which is also tmr.wtf. So tomorrow, what the fuck? And her name is Tamara Wentforth, TMR WTF. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to do an interview podcast where it was, the guys and Tamara having a conversation. So it would constantly be a proper dialogue, but it just felt a little bit quirky and silly, and maybe we're putting too much into it. So maybe we should.
I say try it. The only thing I say is like scheduling multiple different people isn't 50% harder. It's like 300% harder. So what kills podcasts a lot of times is like just scheduling it, just like trying to get that person, your schedules to line up and you've got other things to do. And so then it just dies off. So it might have been a good idea, but it just doesn't happen because of the complexity involved in coordinating all those things. Whereas like coordinating just two people, my schedule and your schedule, we're 9 hours apart. That was hard enough as it is, right? Look how hard that was. It took us months to get it scheduled, right? So
we're both in EO and we were chatting before the show about, workshops that we both do. You were telling me that you've done a podcast workshop in Seattle for the EO chapter, which is wonderful. I know the guys there well. Is this the kind of stuff you tell them on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times these things are what hold people up. I've been, blessed to have amazing conversations with so many people. And you talk about it in the EO world. I've interviewed Vern Harnish twice. I've interviewed Warren Rustin. I've interviewed yourself. I've, interviewed all these iconic entrepreneurs just using it, one conversation at a time. And so a lot of times people like overcomplicate it or they spend too much time focusing on the wrong thing. So a lot of times, that's what we covered in the workshop was just distilling it down to its most important elements.
Yeah, I've often thought that one of the most exciting things about a podcast, even if you never wanted to release it, you've got a very good reason to meet people.
For sure.
So I've met so many people that have reached out to me and said, hey, I'd love to have you on our podcast. This is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'm trying to achieve. And generally, it's if they just said to me, I'd like to meet you for a coffee, it may have been a no.
Well, one, you're in an island in between England and Ireland, so you're not gonna, when are you in the same city, right? There's that, and also like, yeah, you do this a calculus, like, is it worth my time? Is this person worth my time? Whereas, like, if you're recording it and you're publishing it, you're like, well, at least it's published and it's on the internet, and I'm getting exposure.
So to bring this back to Relentless Relevance, this is exactly what I'm talking about, is the state of being appropriate to the matter at hand. So things like podcasts exist as a very, very good medium for relevance because there's a relevant reason for you to engage with somebody, for me to engage with you. There's a nice quid pro quo that happens. And of course, because of the very nature of the medium, we're chatting today, talking about DeepSeek that came out on Monday. And look, I know sometimes the shows take a while to go out, but it's a medium that allows for high state relevance in a big way. And I just think it's very, very, I think that too many people are thinking about this as if they're too late to get started. And I just don't believe it. I think yesterday would have been easier, but tomorrow will be harder.
Every industry is like that, like it's always hardest when you start. You're always looking at people that are further ahead of you and you're like, why should I do it? But I mean, I would do my podcast even if no one was listening. It's worth it for me. I love the conversations, and I love the people I get to meet. I love people listening to it too, but it's worth it for me, even if no one is listening. So, and then the final point I'll make is that to talk about relevance. I've kind of given up on introducing. I love making introductions. I love connecting two people that I think should meet each other. But as you get further along in your career, busy people are too busy for an introduction. If you just try and introduce two people, they're like, especially after COVID, they're like, wait a second, is that person trying to sell me? Like, why am I being introduced to this person? I don't have time for a get to know you call. And so they won't do it. So I've just kind of given up on making those introductions, no matter how much I feel like they really should know one another. They could click. There's so many things they have in common. But if one of them has a podcast, it makes it so much easier. So why not be that person? Because then it makes you more. Why depend on the other person having a podcast? There's like 100, maybe there's 50,000 active podcasts in the world. There's 8 billion people on the planet. So like if you're the one with the podcast, you can connect with 8 billion people on the planet. If you're just waiting for one of those 50,000 people to be willing to interview you on the podcast, that's a very small pool of people that you are going to be networking with.
Totally. And it's, it's funny because there can be two strategies that work simultaneously. You can simultaneously have a podcast guesting strategy and a podcast hosting strategy.
Absolutely.
They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
I think it's
for sure.
Very,
when I started my podcast, I really got started being on other podcasts to see like, how do I feel about this? And I was nervous in the beginning. In fact, last night I was talking to another EO member who's a client of ours who was talking about being on her first few podcasts, and she was nervous about it and everything, and but excited at the same time. And there's so many skills that it practices, telling your story, telling a relevant story, relating to other people, public speaking, all those are it's great experience for people. Thank you, Rich, for bringing that up.
One last thing on that, just because you mentioned public speaking. So a lot of the speakers that we train, we tell them to try and guest on people's podcasts. And the reason is it forces them. Often what will happen is when you deliver to an audience, the feedback loop is slow. So after a talk, people will come up and there's peak end theory. So they don't remember everything you said, and they'll ask you a question about the one thing. But when you're doing it, when you're basically, because often what will happen, some of the material that I've covered today obviously is material that's from my keynote on the topic, because it's what comes close to mind. And so now though, I get an instant feedback loop on the content. So I presented something just now, and then you'd said to me, "Oh, how does this relate to?" And I thought, "Oh, well, I had never thought about it that way." So it kind of took me back. So I had to think about it, process it. But now I understand as a speaker where the gaps are between what's inside my head and what I want inside my audience's head. Because you know, as a host, act as a buffer for the audience, right? That's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to make sure that there is that everything that's coming out of my mouth will get processed well enough so that your audience can parse it.
Yeah.
And this is the other huge value. And that's why I say to people, if you're, absolutely have a podcast, but if you're trying to grow your reputation at all, guest on as many podcasts as you can as well.
I totally
both
agree.
sides of it.
Yeah.
Work.
I mean, 25 years ago, it was so hard to get media attention. You had to be in big publications, there weren't many of them. And now there's so many different, channels where you can get publicity. So we'll wrap on that. Rich, appreciate you bringing that up. And so final thoughts, they can go to check you out where?
Yeah, you can go to getrich.af to learn more about me and the book. Sign up for the newsletter to find out when it comes out in March and April. TMR.WTF for Too Many Robots, and IneedMissingLink.com for presentation related stuff.
Awesome, Rich. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.